During this seminar, I shall review the different types of agricultural tenancies which exist and touch on the legislation and other legal rules which surround them. I'll refer to three key pieces of legislation in this seminar: the Agricultural Holdings Scotland Act 1991, the Agricultural Holdings Scotland Act 2003, and the Land Reform Scotland Act 2016. The 1991 Act and the 2003 Act govern the different types of agricultural holding in Scotland. However, the 2016 Act brought further changes to the 2003 Act into force, and there are still changes to the 2003 Act which are pending. Accordingly, when considering any issue relating to an agricultural tenancy, it's important to ensure that you check that the relevant legislation and check that that legislation you're referring to is up to date. Under the provisions of the 2016 Act now in force, a 1991 Act tenant may offer to sell back the tenancy to the landlord. This is known as the relinquishment and assignation provisions. If the landlord decides not to buy out the tenant's interest in the lease, then the tenant can sell the tenancy on the open market to a tenant who is a new entrant or progressing farmer. In the first instance, the tenant is obliged to serve a notice in writing on the landlord indicating that the tenant will quit the tenancy, providing the landlord pays to the tenant an amount calculated in accordance with the statutory process as compensation for doing so. Under the 2016 Act, this introduced an amnesty procedure by which relevant improvements which would not otherwise qualify for compensation at the end of the tenancy could be made to qualify. The onus was on the tenant to take steps to invoke the amnesty procedure, and this procedure ended on the 13th of December 2020. Only improvements that were carried out prior to the opening of the amnesty process on the 13th of June 2017 would qualify, and it was not necessary to have any valuations carried out as part of the process, and no compensation was payable except at the end of the tenancy. The amnesty applied to improvements carried out under 1991 Act tenancies, SLDTs, LDTs and MLDTs.